My dear child, I just removed your name from the waiting list. Not to send you to the back, not to postpone you further, but to pull you out of a line that was never going to take you where I am, about to walk you right now. Do not scroll past this. What I am about to reveal is not about moving closer to the front of the queue you have been standing in. This is about the queue being the wrong line entirely. A different door exists. A door the waiting list does not lead to, does not know about, and does not have the authority to grant access to, and the credential that opens it has been on your person the entire time you have been standing in a line whose standard door was never the entrance to what was promised to you. Your name is off the list, and off is not rejection, off is bypass. You have been waiting, not casually, with the grinding identity consuming, "This is who I am now" patience of a person whose position in the queue has become the defining characteristic of their current season. You are the one who waits, the one who believes, the one who holds the position, while others who arrived after you are called ahead of you with the specific, incomprehensible. How are they going before me injustice that a waiting list produces when the list's order does not match the arrival's order? My beloved child, the list was never my system. The list belongs to the standard door, and the standard door was never the entrance your promise was behind. I just placed my hand on your shoulder in the line, not to move you forward, to pull you out, because the door I am walking you toward does not require a position on any list. It requires a credential the list never checks for. Stay here. What I reveal next is the credential you have been carrying, and why the line you were standing in could never have accepted it. Type pulled out if you have been standing in a waiting list so long the waiting became your identity. And God just placed his hand on your shoulder, not to advance your position, but to remove you from a line whose standard door was never the entrance to what was promised, because a different door exists that requires a credential this list does not check for. Before we go any further, I need to tell you something that genuinely surprised me. A neuroscientist discovered a simple 7-second technique that actually rewires how your brain processes thoughts. And when I tried it, the difference was almost unsettling. My focus sharpened, ideas started connecting faster, and that mental fog gone. This isn't manifestation nonsense. It's backed by real brain science, and thousands of people are already seeing results. But here's the catch. Only 5 spots are left. If something inside you is saying, try it, trust that instinct. Click the link in the description or pinned comment before it's too late. The credential has been on your person since before you joined the line, and the reason no one in the queue recognized it is because the credential is not readable by the standard door's scanning system, which means you have been standing in a line whose technology was never equipped to detect what you were carrying. My beloved child, I need you to understand why the waiting produced nothing, not why it felt long, why it produced nothing. A waiting list processes names through a standard door whose access criteria are specific to that door. The criteria evaluate each name against the door's requirements. Names that meet the requirements are admitted. Names that do not are held. And names that carry a credential the door system cannot read are held indefinitely. Not because the name is unqualified, but because the scanning system does not have the technology to recognize what the name is carrying. You were not held because you did not qualify. You were held because the system could not read what you carry. My dear one, the credential you carry is not a standard door credential. It is a bypass credential, issued by a different authority for a different door, accessed through a different system, whose scanning technology reads what the standard door's scanner cannot detect. The bypass credential does not compete with the standard credentials that the other people in the line are carrying. It operates on a completely separate authentication layer. The line was scanning you with the wrong technology. And wrong technology produces indefinite hold, regardless of what the person being scanned is carrying. This message was not released for everyone who has been waiting. This was aimed at the one person whose specific, indefinite, watching others advance while remaining held waiting pattern corresponds to the specific scanner cannot read the credential. Wrong line for the wrong door pattern of someone carrying a bypass credential in a standard door queue. Type wrong scanner if you just realized the waiting list held you indefinitely, not because you were unqualified, but because the standard door's scanning system could not read the bypass credential you have been carrying, and the indefinite hold was a technology mismatch rather than a worthiness verdict. I have been watching you stand in the wrong line since the day you joined it. And the watching has been the specific patience of a God who could see the bypass credential on your person, while the standard scanner was returning unreadable, and the person carrying the credential was interpreting the unreadable as unworthy. My dear one, not from the back of the line looking forward, from beside the bypass door, standing at the entrance the credential was issued for. Watching the person whose credential matches this door's scanner stand patiently in a queue whose door does not have the technology to admit them. You were at the wrong door. I was at the right one. And the distance between the two was not geography. It was awareness. My beloved child, I watched the specific moments you almost left the line. There were instances, brief, almost involuntary, where something inside you stirred with the awareness that the queue was not producing progress despite the patience being invested. The stirring was the credential activating, because bypass credentials do not sit dormant on the carrier's person. They pulse at intervals, producing the specific, something is wrong with this line. I should not be here sensation that a credential generates when it detects that the carrier is standing in a queue whose door it was not issued for. The pulsing was your credential telling you. The line was telling you to stay, and the line's voice was louder, because the line had an audience of other waiters whose shared waiting validated the waiting as the correct posture. I chose you for this message because the credential just pulsed at its strongest interval. The pulse that the bypass system designates as the final notification before the authority physically removes the carrier from the wrong line and escorts them to the correct door. My child, the pulse you felt recently, the strongest one yet, was the final notification, and the escort has begun. Type final pulse if God has been watching you stand in the wrong line from beside the bypass door, and the credential on your person has been pulsing at intervals, producing the sensation that something is wrong with this queue, and the strongest pulse you felt recently was the final notification before the authority physically removes the carrier and escorts them to the door the credential was issued for. I know what standing in the wrong line has been doing to the specific part of you, where your belief in your own qualification lives, my beloved child. The line did not merely hold you. The line processed your hold as data, and the data was interpreted by your system as evidence that the hold was a verdict. A judgment made by the standard door's scanner about the quality of the name being scanned and the worthiness of the person carrying it. The scanner returned unreadable. Your system translated unreadable as unacceptable, and unacceptable entered the identity level where the question of whether you belong anywhere significant is answered before the next opportunity is approached. The translation was wrong, but the translation felt like the only available reading. My child, I watched the translation produce its effects across the seasons of the hold. In the early months, the hold was processed as timing, a reasonable delay whose resolution was approaching at a pace the patience could sustain. In the middle months, the hold was processed as confusion, the growing uncertainty of a person whose position in the queue was not advancing at the rate the position's duration should have been producing. By the later months, the hold was processed as verdict, the specific identity level. The scanner has evaluated me and I am not what the door is looking for. Conclusion that an indefinite hold produces in a person who has been standing long enough to conclude the holding is permanent. The verdict settled, quietly, without announcement. The way a conclusion settles into a person whose evidence has accumulated past the threshold where the conclusion can be resisted. I watched the settling happen at the layer where your professional and spiritual identity intersect, the layer that governs whether you approach the next door, believing you carry something the scanner will recognize, or believing you carry something the scanner will reject. That layer has been operating on the verdict for longer than you realize. And the verdict was based on the wrong scanner reading the wrong credential at the wrong door. The deepest wound the wrong line inflicted was not the holding. It was watching people who arrived after you get scanned and admitted through the standard door while your credential returned, unreadable, at the same scanner that read theirs without hesitation. My dear child, you watch them advance, one by one, names that joined the queue after yours, names whose credentials were standard, the specific door-compatible, scanner-readable format that the standard system was built to process. The scanner read their credentials. The door opened. They walked through, and the person who arrived before them, whose credential the scanner could not read, remained in the queue processing the advance of later arrivals as the most personal evidence the line could produce about the quality of the name being held. They went in. You stayed. And staying while later arrivals advanced produced a wound the holding alone could not generate. My beloved child, the wound was not jealousy. It was diagnostic. You were using their advancement as a control group, testing your hold against their admission to determine whether the variable was timing or identity. The control group's data was devastating. Same line, same scanner, same door, different outcomes. The only different variable visible to the person being held was the person themselves. The diagnostic produced the verdict. The problem is me, specifically. I watched the specifically install itself through repeated observations. Each person who advanced past you added a data point to a diagnostic whose conclusion was being reinforced by the accumulation. And the accumulation was producing the specific, I am the variable. Something about me specifically prevents advancement conclusion that the wrong scanner at the wrong door was generating in a person whose credential was not defective, but was simply unreadable by the technology the standard door operates on. My dear one, the variable was never you. The variable was the door, and the door was wrong for the credential you carry. Type wrong door, not wrong me, if you watched later arrivals advance through the same scanner that held you indefinitely. And the diagnostic concluded the variable was you specifically when the variable was always the door, whose scanner could not read the bypass credential you were carrying in a line whose technology was never equipped to detect what was on your person. The indefinite hold was never a verdict on your name. It was the mechanical result of a bypass credential being presented to a standard scanner, whose technology cannot process credentials issued by a higher authority for a higher access door. My beloved one, I need to permanently separate the hold from the identity the hold installed. Your system classified the hold as rejection. The truth is, the hold was incompatibility. Not incompatibility between you and the destination, but incompatibility between the credential you carry and the scanner at the door you were standing in. Line 4. Incompatibility is not rejection. Incompatibility is mismatch. My child, a bypass credential presented to a standard scanner produces a specific result in the scanning system. The scanner receives the credential. The scanner attempts to read it. The reading fails. Not because the credential is blank or defective, but because the data format the credential is encoded in exceeds the scanning technology's processing capacity. The scanner classifies the unreadable credential as hold rather than admit, and the hold persists indefinitely because each subsequent scan produces the same unreadable result. The indefinite hold was the scanner repeating its failed read, not the scanner evaluating your worth. My dear one, the people who advanced through the standard door carried standard credentials. The standard scanner read their standard credentials and produced the standard result. Admission through the standard door to the standard space behind it. Their advancement was real, their admission was genuine, and their destination was the standard level outcome that the standard door provides access to. Your credential does not access the standard level. Your credential accesses the bypass level, and the bypass level is not a better version of the standard level. It is a different category entirely, a category whose entrance is not on the same wall as the standard door, and whose scanner reads what the standard scanner classifies as unreadable. Unreadable at the standard door, perfectly legible at the bypass door. The escort from the line to the bypass door has begun, and the specific sensation of being physically removed from a queue your body has been standing in for so long that the standing became muscle. Memory is producing a disorientation. Your system has no category for processing, my beloved child. Something shifted today. Not a shift in the line's progress, a shift in your relationship to the line itself. The specific, this queue no longer feels like where I belong awareness that arrives when the authority whose hand is on your shoulder begins the physical motion of redirecting the person from the line they chose to the door they were issued for. The belonging shifted, and the shift is the escort beginning. My dear one, I need you to understand what happens when a person is removed from a line they have been standing in long enough for the standing to become their identity. The removal produces resistance. Not the resistance of a person who does not want to leave, the resistance of a body whose muscles have memorized the standing position, and whose system has adapted to the cue's rhythm, and whose identity has been structured around the specific posture of a person waiting in a line for a door, whose scanner cannot read what they carry. The resistance is the body's adaptation objecting to the disruption, not the spirit's discernment rejecting the escort. I have been preparing this escort behind every season of your wrong line standing, while you were waiting and being held and watching others advance and processing the diagnostic that concluded the variable was you. I was at the bypass door, preparing the scanner, confirming the credentials' compatibility, ensuring the door's access system was calibrated to receive the specific credential your person has been carrying since before the first day of the wrong line standing. My child, the bypass door is ready, the scanner is calibrated, and the escort is moving you from a line whose hold was a mismatch to a door whose scanner reads your credential as exactly what it was designed to admit. Type escort begun. If something shifted in your relationship to the waiting today, the queue will no longer for feeling like where you belong. And the shift is the escort beginning because the authority whose hand is on your shoulder is physically moving you from a line whose scanner could not read your credential to a door, whose scanners were calibrated specifically for what you have been carrying. God just removed your name from the waiting list, and you are walking in today. The title carries that specific urgency because the removal from the list and the walking through the bypass door are not sequential events separated by another waiting period, but simultaneous, events occurring in the same motion of a single divine escort. My dear one, I need you to understand the simultaneity. The standard system operates sequentially. Removal from one list is followed by placement on another list is followed by another waiting period, whose duration is determined by the new list's processing speed. The standard system cannot conceive of removal without requeuing, because the standard system's only mechanism for advancement is the queue. The bypass system does not requeue. The bypass system removes and walks through in the same motion. My beloved child, this is directly connected to the title and to the specific waiting that has been consuming your identity. The title says you are walking in today, not you are being moved to a better list, not your position is being advanced, walking in today, through a door the waiting list never had access to, because the door operates on a different system whose credential your wrong line standing prevented you from ever presenting to the right scanner. The removal and the entry are one motion, and the motion is today's motion. My child, the people still standing in the line you were just removed from will not understand why you left. The line's logic says advancement comes through patience and position. The bypass's logic says advancement comes through credential and recognition. And the two logics produce two completely different understandings of how doors open. The line says, wait long enough, and the door will admit you. The bypass says the door was never on this wall, and the person carrying the credential for the door on the other wall does not need to wait in any line to access it. The credential is yours. The other wall has been waiting for you. The bypass door is in front of you right now, my beloved child, and the scanner beside it is reading the credential you have been carrying through the entire wrong line season with the specific, instant, green light recognition that the standard scanner never once produced when your name was presented to its technology. I need you to feel the proximity of the entry, not the distant someday. Your turn will come. Keep waiting, the line is. Moving proximity the queue was producing as background noise for years. The present tense, door in front of you, scanner reading now, credential recognized, green light active proximity of a person who was just escorted from the wrong line to the right door and whose entry is separated from this moment by nothing but the seconds the scanner requires to complete its confirmation. The scanner is reading. The credential is recognized, and the green light is active. My dear one, everything has been building toward this scanner. The wrong line that held you indefinitely. The standard scanner that returned unreadable. The diagnostic that concluded the variable was you. The verdict that settled at the identity level. The people who advanced past you through the standard door. The credential pulsing on your person at intervals the line's noise was drowning out. The final pulse that activated the escort. The hand on your shoulder that removed you from the queue. The walk from the line to the wall, the line never aimed at. And now, the scanner. The right scanner, reading the right credential. Producing the right result for the first time in the entire duration of a holding season, whose every unreadable was a mismatch rather than a rejection. My child, the green light is the first positive scanner result your system has ever processed, and the first positive result after a season of indefinite negatives produces a specific body level, the scanner said yes response, whose intensity is proportional to the duration of the negatives that preceded it. The scanner just said yes. Feel what yes does to a body that only knew hold. Type green light if the bypass scanner is reading your credential right now, producing the first positive result your system has ever received after a season of indefinite unreadable. And the green light active at the door you were escorted to is the confirmation that the credential you carried through your entire wrong line season was always perfectly legible to the scanner it was issued for. The door just opened. The credential was accepted, And the person who stood in the wrong line for a duration, long enough to make the waiting their identity, is now walking through a bypass entrance, whose existence the line they were standing in did not know about, could not access, and was never designed to lead toward. My beloved child, this is the moment the bypass door opens, and the person who was removed from the waiting list steps through an entrance that the list never had jurisdiction over. The moment the credential that returned unreadable at every standard scanner is read with full recognition by the scanner it was always issued for. The moment the holding season ends, not with a promotion to the front of the queue, but with the elimination of the queue's relevance to the person whose credential grants access to adore the queue was never aimed at. The line is behind you, the door is in front of you, and you are walking through. God just removed your name from the waiting list. You are walking in today. The title said today. The door opened today. The credential was read today. And the person whose name was on the waiting list is no longer on the waiting list, because the waiting list has no jurisdiction over a person who has been escorted to a door the list does not have access to. My child, the walking in is not the feeling of being advanced in the queue. It is the completely different feeling of leaving the queue entirely. The queue produced the posture of waiting. The bypass door produces the posture of entering, and entering feels nothing like the front of the line, because the front of the line still accesses the standard door, while the bypass door accesses what the standard door was never built to reach. What is on the other side of the bypass door exceeds what the standard door provides, because bypass level access opens onto bypass level provision. Now that the bypass door is open, and you have walked through it, everything about the waiting list identity that governed your posture, your expectation, and your belief about how advancement happens is being permanently restructured by the experience of entering through a door the list never knew existed, my dear child. This is what happens when a person whose entire identity was built around their position in a queue discovers they were never supposed to be in the queue at all. The identity does not merely adjust, it disintegrates. Because the identity was built on the foundational assumption that the line was the path, and the bypass door just proved the line was never the path to what was promised. The line was the path to the standard door. The credential was the path to the bypass door, and the two paths lead to two entirely different destinations. The waiting was in the wrong line, for the wrong door, to the wrong destination. My beloved child, the disintegration of the waiting identity is producing cascading effects across every area of your life, where the waiting list posture was governing your approach. The patience that crossed from trust into paralysis is being replaced by the motion that bypass-level access produces. The theology of waiting that classified movement as presumption is being replaced by the theology of credential. The understanding that a person carrying a bypass-level credential does not wait in standard-level lines because the credential grants access the line cannot provide. The credential replaces the waiting, not because waiting was wrong, because waiting in the wrong line was misdirected, and the bypass-level destination that the door just opened onto carries provisions and possibilities and dimensions that the standard-level destination behind the standard door does not contain. Not a better version of the same level, a different category of access entirely, accessed only by the credential the standard scanner could not read. Type different destination if the bypass door just revealed that the standard door and the bypass door lead to entirely different destinations, and the waiting list identity is disintegrating because the line was never the path to what was promised. The credential was always the path, and the destination behind the bypass door exceeds what the standard door provides because it belongs to a different category of access entirely. Let me show you what your life looks like on the other side of the bypass door. Because the space behind this entrance is not the same room the standard door leads to, and what is available at bypass level access exceeds what the waiting list's standard door was ever positioned to provide. My dear one, the first thing that changes is the pace. You have been operating at waiting list pace, the specific, queue-governed, move only when the line advances speed that the standard system imposes on every name in its registry. Waiting list pace is determined by the line's processing speed. Your pace was not your own, it was the line's. And the line's pace was the variable that made the advancing feel impossible. Because the line processes at a rate determined by its total volume rather than by the urgency of the individual name being processed. The bypass door does not operate on queue pace, it operates on credential pace. My beloved child, credential pace is determined by the credential's clearance level, rather than by the number of people ahead of the carrier. And a bypass level credential carries a clearance whose pace is governed by the authority who issued it, rather than by the system the standard door is processed through. The mornings change permanently. You have been waking into the queue, the first conscious awareness of each day, calculating your position relative to the names ahead of you and estimating the duration remaining, based on the line's processing speed. Tomorrow you wake on the other side of the bypass door. No queue, no position, no processing speed to calculate. Just the open space of a room whose access was determined by credential rather than by patience, and whose provisions are not distributed by queue position but by the clearance level. The credential carries. The provisions at bypass level are not rationed by position. They are available by access, and your access is open. People who watched you stand in the waiting line are going to notice you are no longer in it before they understand where you went. Because a person who disappears from a queue and reappears on the other side of a bypass door carries an atmospheric authority that the waiting list version could never have produced, regardless of how patiently the waiting list version held their position. My beloved child, the ones who were standing in the line alongside you, who watched the same others advance past both of you, who perhaps shared the specific queue-level solidarity of people processing the same indefinite hold together. Those people are about to notice your absence from the line, and the absence will produce a specific "where did they go? How did they get through?" confusion that the standard system cannot answer, because the standard system does not have visibility into the bypass system. They will look for you in the line. You will not be there. And your absence from the line will be the first evidence they encounter that a different door exists. My child, the connections forming on the other side of the bypass door are connections the waiting line could never have produced. There are relationships, assignments, and divine partnerships that exist exclusively in the bypass level space. Connections whose formation requires the credential level access that the standard door's scanning system does not provide. These connections were never available to you while you were standing in the standard line, not because you were unworthy of them, because the connections exist in a space the standard door does not open onto. The space is accessible now, and what is forming in the space is calibrated to the credential you carry. My dear one, what approaches a person in the bypass level space is fundamentally different from what was available in the standard level queue. The bypass attracts bypass, and bypass level connections produce bypass level outcomes. Type bypass attracts if people who watched you in the waiting line are about to notice your absence from it. And what is forming in the bypass level space behind the door the credential opened is calibrated to the access your credential carries, producing connections and outcomes the standard level queue could never have provided, because the connections exist in a space the standard door does not open onto. I need you to understand why I issued you a bypass credential rather than a standard one. Because the credential type reveals something about the assignment I designed for your life that the standard door's destination could never have supported, my beloved child. Standard credentials are issued for standard assignments. The standard door opens onto a standard level space whose provisions and connections and opportunities are calibrated to the scope of work the standard assignment requires. The scope is real, the assignment is genuine, and the provisions behind the standard door adequately support what the standard assignment demands. Your assignment is not standard, and non-standard assignments require non-standard access. My child, the bypass credential was issued because the assignment embedded in your life operates at a scope that the standard level space does not contain the resources to support. The connections the assignment requires do not exist behind the standard door. The provisions the assignment demands exceed what the standard level distribution system allocates, and the opportunities the assignment activates are positioned in a space that the standard door's wall does not have an opening to. The credential matches the assignment, not the line. My dear one, I chose you for the bypass credential because I saw the assignment in you before you joined the wrong line. The assignment was visible to the authority who issues credentials long before the person carrying the assignment entered the queue, whose scanner could not read what the authority had issued. The credential was on your person, the assignment was in your design, and the line you joined, the standard queue whose standard door cedes to the standard space, was the reasonable but incorrect assumption of a person who did not know the credential they were carrying granted access to a door the line could not see. You assumed the line was the path because the line was the only path visible from where you were standing. The bypass door was behind you, and behind is not visible to a person facing forward in a queue. The doubt surfacing right now is using the most theologically dressed objection in its collection. The voice that says leaving the line is cutting the queue, and cutting the queue is presumption, and presumption is the opposite of the patience God rewards. My child, it sounds like this. I was taught to wait my turn. I was taught that patience is the posture God honors, and that moving before being called is getting ahead of God, rather than responding to Him. If I leave this line, I am abandoning the discipline the waiting was supposed to produce. If I walk through a door, the line does not lead to I am circumventing the process God placed me in for a reason. The waiting list was a test, and leaving the test before it is graded is failure disguised as faith. That doubt just applied the theology of the standard door to the mechanics of the bypass door, and the two doors operate under different theologies entirely. My beloved child, patience at the standard door is correct for people carrying standard credentials. The standard door processes names in order, and the standard system rewards the patience that sustains the position until the name is called. Patience at the standard door for a person carrying a standard credential is not a test. It is the process. But patience at the standard door for a person carrying a bypass credential is not patience. It is mislocation. And mislocation dressed as patience is the most convincing form of being in the wrong place, because the dressing makes the wrong place feel virtuous. You were not being patient. You were being mislocated. And mislocated patience produces the specific, indefinite watching others advance, holding without progress, suffering that patience at the correct door does not generate. The removal from the line is not presumption, it is relocation. And relocation by the hand of the authority who issued the credential is the most obedient response to a God whose bypass door requires the carrier to leave the standard line. Type relocation, not presumption, if the doubt accused leaving the line of being presumption. And you now understand that patience at the wrong door for a person carrying a bypass credential is not patience but mislocation, and the removal by the hand of the authority who issued the credential is the most obedient response to a God whose bypass door requires leaving the standard line. During every season you stood in the wrong line. I was not at the bypass door waiting impatiently for the carrier of the credential to figure out they were at the wrong entrance. I was in the line, with you, standing beside you in the queue, present with you during the holding that the standard scanner's unreadable was producing in a person whose credential was never defective. My beloved child, you imagined a God who was at the bypass door the entire time wondering why the person carrying the credential was not showing up, who was positioned at the correct entrance, watching the time pass while the carrier stood at the wrong one, exasperated by the mislocation, waiting for the person to realize their error and redirect themselves. I was never exasperated. I was beside you. My child, standing in the wrong line with the person carrying the right credential is not a contradiction the divine presence system cannot hold. I was simultaneously at the bypass door preparing the scanner and in the standard line, standing beside the person whose season at the wrong door was producing the specific suffering the wrong scanner generates on the holder of an unreadable credential. Both locations, same God, same presence, same love for the person whose mislocation was sincere. There were moments in the queue where the holding was heaviest, where the watching of others advancing and the receiving of the indefinite hold result from the standard scanner produced the specific floor level. I do not belong anywhere grief. That professional invisibility generates in a person who has been told by every scanner they have been presented to that their credential is unreadable. In those moments I was beside you, not correcting the mislocation. The correction required a specific timing the escort was scheduled for, but present in it. Standing in a line I knew was wrong with a person I knew was carrying the right credential for a door I knew was waiting. My dear one, I was never absent during the wrong line. I was present in your wrong until the timing was right for the right. I know the exact moment in the queue when the holding produced its deepest wound. My dear one, the specific instance when a name that arrived visibly after yours was scanned and admitted through the standard door while your credential returned unreadable for a number of times. You had stopped counting. Not the first Passover, not the most recent. The one that broke something at the foundation of your belief that the system was fair. There was a specific name, a specific person, whose arrival in the queue after yours was visible to you, whose credentials, visible to you, were thinner than yours, whose scanning, visible to you, produced instant recognition from the same standard scanner that had returned unreadable on your credential every time it was presented. My beloved child, I know that moment because I was standing beside you when it happened, and what I felt through my presence beside you was the specific, tectonic, foundation-level shift that occurred in your belief system when the fairness framework that was holding the patients together cracked under the weight of an advancement whose injustice the patients could not absorb. The fairness cracked, and the crack is where the deepest wound entered. I know what entered through the crack, the specific, named, precisely contoured doubt that says, maybe I am not carrying anything the system recognizes because maybe I am not carrying anything at all. The doubt went deeper than the professional level. It reached the existential level, the level where a person's belief in whether they carry anything of value to any system in any domain is stored. My child, the doubt was produced by presenting a bypass credential to a standard scanner. The doubt would never have formed if the credential had been presented to the correct scanner. And the God who knows the moment the fairness cracked is the God whose bypass scanner just read your credential with the instant recognition the standard scanner could never produce. Type fairness restored if God just identified the specific passover that cracked the fairness at the foundation. And the doubt that entered the crack about whether you carry anything of value was produced by a bypass credential being presented to a standard scanner, meaning the doubt was a mismatch error, not a value assessment. And the bypass scanner's instant recognition is restoring what the crack destroyed. Now that the bypass door is open, and the credential has been read, and you are standing on the other side of an entrance the waiting list never had access to. There is one thing I need you to do, my beloved child, and it is the instruction that determines whether the bypass level space produces its full provision for the person who just entered it. Walk, do not stand at the threshold. The cue trained your body to stand. The line's only movement was waiting in place. The specific, feet planted, do not move until called posture that the standard system requires from every name in its registry. The posture was correct for the line. The posture is paralyzing for the bypass space. My child, the bypass space does not distribute by position. It distributes by movement. The provisions, the connections, the opportunities that exist in the bypass level space are activated by the motion of the person walking through them, not by the person standing at the threshold, waiting to be served the way the cue trained them to expect provision would arrive. The cue serves the stationary. The bypass serves the moving. When you entered the bypass door, your body defaulted to the cue posture, feet planted, waiting for instruction, expecting the provision to come to the position the way the line system would have eventually delivered it if the scanner had ever been able to read the credential. The default is understandable, but the default must be overridden. Walk into the space, move through it. Let the credential on your person interact with the environment the credential was issued for. Because the bypass space's provisions are not stacked at the entrance waiting for collection. They are distributed throughout the space and are activated by proximity. The person carrying the credential must walk near them for the provisions to recognize the credential and release what the credential authorizes. Walk. The provision is not coming to the threshold. The provision is waiting for the credential to walk near it. You made it through the bypass door, my beloved child, and I need you to stand inside the space long enough to feel what it means to be recognized instantly by a scanner after a season of being returned as unreadable by every scanner the wrong line presented you to. Feel the recognition, not the hold, not the unreadable, not the indefinite identity-consuming, watching others advance. The variable must be me. Result, the standard scanner was returning at the wrong door. The recognition. The specific, green light, credential accepted, door opening. Walk right in recognition that the bypass scanner produced the moment the correct credential was presented to the correct technology at the correct door for the first time. The recognition is yours, and recognition after a season of unreadable is the most overwhelming scanner result a person can receive. I want to thank you for something the wrong line made almost impossible to sustain. Thank you for staying in the queue long enough for the credential to develop the specific, tested by misplacement, refined by rejection quality that the bypass scanner reads as its highest clearance level. Thank you for the seasons the standard scanner returned unreadable, and your system absorbed the result as a verdict on your worth. Thank you for the passovers that cracked the fairness, and the doubt that entered through the crack, and the belief in your own value that thinned but never fully disappeared. My dear child, Thank you for carrying the credential through the wrong line without losing it, because a person who discards a credential they believe is defective discards the access the credential provides. You carried what felt defective through an entire season, and the carrying preserved the access the bypass door just granted. Let the tears come. Not cue tears, not holding tears, recognition tears. The tears of a person whose credential just produced a green light for the first time after a season, where every scanner returned the specific identity wounding, indefinite result that the wrong technology generates on the right credential. Type recognition tears if tears are forming right now because the bypass scanner just read your credential with instant recognition, and the green light produced after a season of unreadable at every wrong scanner is the most overwhelming result a person who was held indefinitely at the wrong door can receive. You are not the name on the waiting list anymore, my beloved child. That identity, the one who stood in a queue whose scanner could not read what they were carrying, the one who watched late arrivals advance through the standard door while their credential returned unreadable at a technology that was never equipped to process what the bypass authority had issued. The one who concluded the variable was them specifically when the variable was always the door. The one whose patience at the wrong entrance became indistinguishable from being forgotten, while the credential on their person was pulsing at intervals, trying to redirect the carrier to a door the line could not see. That identity was permanently retired the moment the hand on the shoulder pulled the carrier from the queue and the escort delivered them to the bypass door. And the scanner read the credential with instant recognition and the green light activated, and the door opened onto a space the standard system does not have visibility into. You are the person who walked through the bypass door now, and through changes everything the line was saying. The waiting list identity that governed your pace, your posture, your belief about how advancement happens, and your relationship with the credential you were carrying through a system that could not read it, has been permanently replaced by the bypass identity. The specific, credential recognized, wrong line survived, right door entered, walking not waiting identity of a person whose removal from the list was not a rejection, but the most significant promotion the authorities system provides. My dear child, removal from the list was the promotion, not advancement on the list. Removal from it. From this moment forward, you carry the identity of a person whose God bypasses lines, not a person who waits in standard queues carrying bypass credentials. A person whose credential is recognized by the scanner it was issued for. A person whose advancement does not come through the line's processing speed, but through the authorities' direct escort to a door the line was never aimed at. The line was the wrong path. The credential was the right one. And the right credential at the right scanner at the right door just opened access to everything the wrong line was, preventing the carrier from reaching, while the carrier believed the line was the only path available. The queue is behind you. The bypass space is around you. The credential is recognized, and the person walking through a space whose provisions are activated by movement rather than position is not the person who stood in the queue for years believing their turn would come. Because turns belong to the standard system, and the bypass system does not operate on turns. It operates on credentials. And yours just opened every door it was ever issued for. Walk, my beloved child. The bypass space responds to movement. The provisions are distributed throughout, and the God who escorted you from the wrong line to the right door is walking beside you in the bypass level space, not leading you to a position to wait in, but walking with you through an environment where every step activates what the credential authorizes, and every provision that activates was always yours. and was always waiting for the carrier to arrive at the door it was stored behind. Subscribe to this channel so that every time God removes your name from a waiting list, the escort reaches you before the queue convinces you the line is the only path. You are not someone who waits in the wrong line anymore. You are someone whose God bypasses systems by escorting credential carriers to doors the standard queue cannot see. The next message carries the first bypass level provision report from a person walking through a space the waiting list never had access to. And what the credential activates as the carrier moves through the bypass level environment will prove that the indefinite hold was always a mismatch. The credential was always valid, and the door was always waiting for the person the line could never have delivered. Type walking through if you are leaving this message permanently changed. Knowing the line was the wrong path, the scanner was the wrong technology. The hold was mismatch, not rejection. The credential was valid the entire time. The bypass door was on a wall. The queue could not see, and the God who issued the credential before you joined the wrong line is the same God who escorted you out of it today and walked you through. The only door that was ever designed to read what you have been carrying. Since before the first day of a wait that was never supposed to be your path to what was promised.